Warm welcome to all our panelists and participants. We will now begin with session 5 on deepening people to people contacts between India and Africa, role of knowledge, culture and tourism. Allow me to introduce our very distinguished panel. We are extremely honored to have Ambassador Dinesh Patnaik, Director General, Indian Council of Cultural Relations, as the chair for this session. The first speaker of the session is Professor Sanjukta Bhattacharya, former professor, Jadavpur University, India. The next speaker of this session is Mr. Alassane Cissouma. Mr. Cissouma is from Mali and is a journalist with the Mali Tribune. The last speaker of the session is Mr. Waihiga Mwaura, editor Citizen TV, Kenya. Before we begin with the proceedings, few housekeeping rules. The participants can ask questions by logging into the chat box at the bottom of the page. Click on the guest option, type your name, accept the terms and conditions, and join the discussion. With this, I would hand over the proceedings to Ambassador Dinesh Patnaik. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Neha. Welcome to all the participants. Regarding India-Africa relations, what we have seen is no matter whether it is Anglophone Africa, Francophone Africa, Lusophone Africa, whether it is North Africa, South Africa, East, West, there is a great affinity for India. We have close political and economic ties which go back centuries. If you look at it historically, the trade ties started with the monsoon winds, which put navigation patterns, which brought people from the east coast of Africa to India and back and forth. You have historically records from even the Greek period and even earlier of trading with east of Africa. And politically, the struggle for decolonization, the independence movements in Africa, which India led from the front. India was the head of the decolonization committee of the UN. So politically and economically, we had very, very close ties. And this, when you look at it economically, I have a very funny story which I always keep on hearing, is that one of the few ways they knew that India and Africa had earlier relations was to find black peppercorns in the nose of Ramses II in Egypt. You know, when they mummified the Ramses II, they put black peppercorns, and black peppercorns only came from Kerala. So these were the signs of how India and Africa go back centuries. But that's jokes apart. The natural affinity and friendship which we had during the colonial period created a generation of leaders and a generation of people who had close ties across. But as we go to the younger generation now, we find that the ties are not as strong as it was before. There is a mismatch today which was not there in the past, and the future of both countries lie with the youth. Today, Africa has a population of about 1.3 billion. India has an equal population of about 1.3 billion. So the youth become important. And if you go by an old African proverb which says if you need to do fast action, give it to the young people because they can run faster. So it's basically important that we work with the youth because, and sometimes what happens is we don't take the youth as, we always tell the youth as future leaders. It's actually not true. You should call the youth the leaders of today because it's our old tradition which both Africa and India have, where we actually look for leadership to the older people. You know, African traditions are the same as Indian traditions. We look up to the older people to have leadership. So we always look at the youth as being leaders of tomorrow, not leaders of today. But if we have to change the narrative, we have to change the paradigm, we have to look at the youth as leaders of today. And for that, it's important to get to know each other. But what I find when I look at it is that our knowledge systems are poor. We do not have much research being done between India and Africa into our historical linkages, nor are we doing much research on the contemporary linkages. Whatever research is being done on India and Africa is being done by other countries separately on India and Africa, and perhaps the linkages come. But I don't find universities either in Africa or in India which are dedicated, or large number of universities dedicated to the study of India and Africa relationship. This is strange given the fact that education was one of the pillars of our relationship. And this relationship goes back a long way. If you look at many of the leaders of Africa, most of them studied in India, or many of them had Indian teachers. And so this gave birth to a whole generation of leaders who had close affinity with India. But that's changing. And that we need to make a difference right now. Because currently ICCR gives about 1,000 scholarships a year to Africa. But that's still not enough because the demand is very high. But more than that, it's not about Africans coming to study to India. I don't find Indians going to study in Africa. You cannot have a relationship unless it is both ways. And we need to work on all these, because if we are to look at the future will have the two largest continents, which is the Indian subcontinent and the African continent, having the maximum number of young people in the world. The rest of the world will be an aging population. India and Africa will be the two young populations, with almost 1 billion plus people on both continents being less than 35. So having youth exchanges is important. And when we look at youth exchanges, what are we looking at? We are looking at things like sports. Of course, India has cricket linkages with Africa, with South Africa, with Kenya, with others, but that's very limited. What we are looking for is things like football. There's a lot to learn. IPL in India has been a big success. IPL is the Cricket Premier League. Has been a big success because we get foreign players to work in India to play with the IPL. Why can't we do the same with the Indian Soccer League? Why can't we have African players playing in the Indian Soccer League in India, or African coaches and trainers coming to train teams in India? These are things we can look at and see what we can do. More than that, the other thing which is very important is films, music and dance. I have been to Africa. I'm probably one of the few people who has traveled extensively through Africa. And I've seen from Egypt to Morocco to Senegal to Ghana to Nigeria to South Africa to Kenya to Ethiopia, Indian films are popular everywhere. Films, music, dance. And this is something which we need to tap into. This is the kind of linkages we need to tap into. But on the obverse side, how many Indians are actually aware of African films? How many people know that Nigeria is the second largest producer of films in the world after Bollywood, after India, and more than Hollywood? It's a powerhouse. Films are produced in Africa all across, but our knowledge of African film systems are minuscule. There are a lot of Africans who come to get trained in India in FTI and NSD, but how many of them get to intern in Bollywood? How many of them get to work in Indian film industry here? How many Indian technicians, filmmakers are actually able to go to work in Africa? These are things which is the strength between our two countries, but we need to work more to get these working. And this is something I hope the panel will discuss as we go along. More than that, it's all about launching movies. Where are there? There are no joint collaboration movies between India and Africa. One of the few things which movies help is increase interaction between few people and also tourism. And that I come to the last thing which I wanted to talk to, tourism. We as tourists, India and Africa, we travel to other parts of the world, but we don't travel to each other's countries. Each of us has amazing tourism potential, but very less connectivity, awareness of the tourism sites. There is a slight increase now of some tourists, high-end tourists going to do safaris and other amusement centers in Africa. But real tourism where you move across is only limited to diaspora returning home or business people traveling. Tourists do not travel. All these are issues I wanted to raise because I wanted the panel to look at all this, and maybe when we have a discussion we will go in depth into all these issues. But if we have to have people-to-people contact between India and Africa and increase the role of the three things that I've said, which is knowledge, culture and tourism, we need to tackle it at the grassroots because the future belongs to India and Africa. And if we do not tackle the fact that the youth do not know each other, we will go separate ways and the future will elude us. So with that, I will hand over to Dr. Sanjukta Bhattacharya to make her first statement.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Patnaik. Because I'm going to speak on some of the things that you mentioned right now. But first, let me thank the organizers of this webinar, ICWA, its Director General, Dr. Raghavan, and the Research Director, Dr. Nivedita Ray, and Dr. Neha Sinha, with whom, in fact, I've been in touch all through, prompting me to basically join in time and all that. People-to-people contact, and this is a very general paper that I'm going to present over here, because there was no specific topic as such, and so I thought, let me deal with some of the issues, and in fact, you raised most of them, Ambassador, in your preliminary presentation. People-to-people contact and communications, as any business school, management institute, or communications and management studies will emphasize, is important for the functioning of any enterprise, because without good interpersonal relations between management and workers, between the seller and the buyer, or between the administrator and the administered, there are bound to be hitches because people are individuals with their own views, perceptions, and prejudices, and they're not machines. The same is true for international relations. Government-to-government MOUs can work at an automated level, but good relations between countries can only come through the mutual goodwill of the people of the countries concerned. How does this goodwill come about? Through people-to-people contact, which can help an understanding of peoples and cultures and can act as lubricators, as facilitators for bilateral and multilateral relations. Multi-level government-to-government partnerships can be facilitated by people-to-people relations between India and Africa, and because this creates a positive understanding of each other's histories and cultures. In 2020, of course, governments have been rightly promoting the concept of every man is an island due to COVID. And without international travel for business or leisure, there has been little opportunity for connecting physically. But we live in a digitalized age, an age of TV, a media age of mobile phones, which provides social space in so many different ways that connecting is not difficult. And this webinar itself is proof of that. This paper will look into people-to-people connections between Africa and India through two lenses. First, the traditional lens of travel and tourism, media connectivity, films and cultural exchanges, and second, through the digital lens of social digital spaces, which provide new opportunities to connect through Zoom, Google Meet, YouTube, e-books, e-music, e-exhibitions, and what have you. First, however, it needs to be noted that Africa is a continent of many countries while India is one country. When we speak of any kind of interaction, people, commerce, or government, India should factor in all the countries and not think of Africa as a monolith, because each of these countries have their own specific histories, culture, values, and form of government. So, when Prime Minister Modi, speaking at the Ugandan Parliament in 2018, spoke of focusing on African priorities in promoting the 10 guiding principles of Indian engagement in Africa, the issue is that there may be competing priorities since Africa has many countries. We can understand these competing priorities if we get to know the essence of each country through proper people-to-people contact and a study of their history, research, as the ambassador mentioned in his opening remarks. Of course, the best contact is direct physical contact, and this can be promoted through travel and tourism. The fact that most countries have a Ministry of Tourism shows that the tourism industry is broadly recognized as an organized agency for international cooperation because tourism offers a platform for enhanced people-to-people relations. Contact between citizens of different lands paves the way for mutual appreciation, acceptance, and understanding between foreign nationalities and provides an opportunity to revisit preconceived ideas and stereotypes and thus creates a positive perception of one another. In fact, more and more Indians have been visiting some specific African countries for holidays, meetings, even as wedding destinations, honeymoons, etc. And this is, of course, the high end, those who can spend. But the preferred destination seems to be South Africa. And that country is well aware of the potential this offers, also financially, and has been gearing up for Indian visitors and showcasing their country for several years. Last year, about 81,316 Indians visited the country till October. And the South African Tourism Board did research on the reasons for the visits. 50% came from Mumbai, and of these, most went to South Africa for South Africa's wildlife, as well as its scenic beauty. But about 22 went for what they call MICE, meetings, incentives, conferences, and exhibitions. And 25% were business travelers. Keeping this in mind, South African Tourism carried out a roadshow in 4 cities of India, Delhi, Bangalore, Pune, and Mumbai in January 2020, bringing 43 key South African exhibitors introducing novel products, luxury experiences, culinary capabilities addressing vegetarian requirements of Indians, advanced MICE infrastructure, and looking for business partnerships. It showcased South African indigenous preferences, wine tasting pop-ups, and promoted new regions of South Africa like the West Coast, Port Elizabeth, and the Panorama route, since most Indians base themselves normally in Cape Town, Durban, or Johannesburg. In fact, since 2010-11, South African tourism has had an India office with the country head who promoted out-of-house, that is OOHU, advertising with different focus areas every year. In 2011, it was Chalo South Africa, and in 2012, it was Leave the Ordinary Behind. And they used wall graphics, glow cubes, bus shelters, billboards, etc. to advertise. In 2019 January, the Minister of Tourism, Derek Hannigan, visited India to discuss tourism between India and South Africa, and importantly, stressed on air connectivity, simplifying visa procedures for Indians, and accrediting select travel agents and tour operators. Other countries in Africa have not launched similar campaigns, but neither has India, which is much to showcase. Travel companies in India like Thomas Cook, Cox & Kings, SOTC, Kesari Tours, Veena World offer attractive package tours to Africa, but one did not see, while looking at web pages, any similar package for Africans wishing to visit India. In fact, so far as Africa is concerned, Indian tourism of the Ministry of Tourism has only 7 international offices, and the one in Dubai has jurisdiction over the entire Middle East and South Africa. And entire Africa. It is, in fact, a very large area for any one office. What is important in tourism is connectivity, and here too, much needs to be done. Over 80% of traffic between India and African countries flies via a third-party hub. Currently, there are direct flights to only 7 countries in Africa, and of course, during COVID, there are no flights. These include, actually, the 7 flights include Mauritius and Seychelles. Another constraint is Indian visas, which take long, despite the fact that Indian missions are expanding in Africa. What India seems to be interested in is medical tourism, an euphemism for traveling for medical treatment. Searching for web pages attracting Africans to India, I found none, except a very few on medical tourism, which were very, very informative. In fact, I'd like to mention one page, Tour to India for Health, using 2 and 4 for Tour to India for Health. This was very informative, and in fact, it had a lot of material on services like pediatric surgery to stem cell therapy, with hospitals mentioned, doctors' names, and information on the disease and the treatment accorded in each of these hospitals. According to data, about 40,000 Nigerians visited India in 2015, half of them for medical reasons. Hospitals offer packages which include the patient's stay in hospital, boarding for an accompanying adult, airport transfers, etc. The Indian government provides additional incentives, including discounted travel costs for sightseeing. Post-surgery, the Focus Africa programs and the Pan-African e-network ensures continuity of consultation and care. However, South Africa, with its fast developing medical infrastructure and state-of-the-art instruments, may prove to be a strong contender for the same market because of lower travel costs for African patients and excellent medical care. So medical tourism to India can face a strong challenge in the future, and this is something that we must also think about. Another point must be made. Tourism, medical or otherwise, does not lead to automatic cooperation. It acts as a catalyst, with much depending on how a nation and its citizens respond to this opportunity. It is part of a greater social transformation that begins with the culture of accepting and tolerating diversity. People from Africa, whether they are students, business travelers, or tourists, should be made to feel welcome in India. One major constraint is people-to-people contact. People contact is the absence of direct sources of information. Here, in fact, my other 2 panelists are journalists, and they will bear me out, as I hope. There is no direct sense of source of information about each other, and there's inadequate media coverage in both India and Africa. News comes mainly from Western sources, both in India and Africa, and the Western lens colors the news. Media outlets do not station representatives in African capitals or in New Delhi because they claim financial unviability. Here, one can suggest that technology should be leveraged optimally. Also, the Indian media could establish a network of local stringers and part-time correspondents like the Western media does, who could regularly file stories for the Indian continent. It may be mentioned that BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, and other major television broadcasters have regular programs that focus on Africa. And we see them and we learn what Westerners want to know about Africa. For instance, the Africanization of the church worship. No Indian TV broadcaster has had any exclusive program on Africa, let alone regular ones. Perhaps the national channels under the government could be cajoled into showcasing Africa once in a while for a better understanding of its people and culture by our common citizens. Films, dance, music, literature, and crafts, all part of a country's soft power, can also help promote people-to-people relations. In fact, Indian films, dance, music, and cultural festivals, as the ambassadors pointed out, have reached most parts of Africa. But the reverse flow, African dance, music, crafts, requires more exposure to Indian audiences. Greater attention needs to be paid to cultural cooperation on both sides. Here, let me mention just two, films and books. People who cannot travel often get an idea of a culture and its people through movies and literature. Films and videos are actually vehicles of culture, identity, and values, and can open the door to dialogue and understanding between peoples. We often hear how Bollywood movies are popular among African audiences, but do we question why? Indian cinema arrived in Africa in the 1950s. From the very beginning, Africans reacted to these movies, early movies, which had little color, exotica, or dance, primarily because they related to the culture which was presented. Indians revere the family and elders, dress in long tunics, eat with their fingers, carry loads on their heads, wear turbans and veils. There are cows on the streets. There are also multi-generation households. There are songs and the drumming of the tabla, romantic love, but no explicit sex. And there is the importance of morality, honor, family name, values, and religion. All these are things that have their counterparts in African culture. And modern Bollywood movies, with their love for color and extravaganza, exotic dances, catchy tunes, large weddings, juxtaposed to images of struggles against exploitation and poverty, provide a path between tradition and modernity, something that also strikes a chord in Africa. On the other hand, few African movies are shown in India, although some are exceptional. For instance, the 1980 South African comedy, The Gods Must Be Crazy, the 1966 Senegalese film, Black Girl, depicting inherent racism in France, and the 2005 Oscar-winning South African film, Tsotsi. And I'm sure there are many more which Indians can relate to, but we see so few of them. And Ambassador, I'd like to say that I'm happy that film collaborations have actually begun. Hamisha Ahuja, who grew up in Nigeria, is collaborating with a Nigerian firm in Namaste Wahala, using African stars and Indian stars too. The film depicts both Indian and African cultures, with no culture being placed over the other. Interestingly, Wahala means trouble. And it will be interesting to watch Namaste Wahala, Namaste Trouble, which was due this year, but I do not know whether it was actually brought out. The South African 2012 movie Material depicts a Muslim family of Indian origin in the post-apartheid period and should engross Indian audiences. Maybe the government should think about African film festivals in India to introduce Indian people to African culture. Similarly, there could also be book fairs and literary festivals in India and African countries. I do not know how well African readers are acquainted with Indian writers, perhaps Salman Rushdie and other Booker Prize winners, but the average Indian reader may be acquainted with Chinua Achebe, Chimamanda Adichie, and Nadine Gordimer, but are they acquainted with Ben Okri of Ghana, who also won the Booker Prize for his book, The Famished Road, or Senegalese feminist writer Mariana Ba, or Aminata Forma of Sierra Leone, who was nominated for the Orange Prize. American and British writers have familiarized Indian readers for generations about their countries and cultures, making us no strangers to lands that many of us have never visited. So why doesn't the governments of African countries and India begin bring each other's books and writers to their respective countries as a positive step towards people-to-people relations. Sports is another great connector, as the ambassador said. African footballers in India are sports heroes, especially in Kolkata, where I am based, which loves football, and where Chima Okere of Nigeria was a superstar basically our football, a star attraction way back in the 1980s. The important sports clubs of Kolkata, Mohun Bagan, Mohammedan Sporting, East Bengal, all have and have had numerous African footballers in the last 4 decades. And now Kerala and Goa sports clubs have also started hiring African players. And now that we have I-League, the Indian Super League, and the National Football League, African footballers are more than welcomed in many Indian football clubs. Diplomacy through sports can be promoted further if joint sports events are organized, if Indian runners and footballers are sent for training to African sports institutes, and African sports heroes are hired as coaches for budding Indian sportsmen. Very briefly, the other point that I wish to make, connectivity through the digital space. The digital space is the new normal for both continents. And as the ambassador said, the majority of the population of both Africa and India are very, very young. In fact, 50%, estimated 50% of Indian population and estimated 60% of Africa's population are below 20. These people, with their mobile phones and laptops as constants, do not need to connect physically, and they do not very often. People-to-people connectivity is endless in the digital age. While India has facilitated digital education and telemedicine through the Pan-African e-network and platforms like eVidya Bharati and e-Arogya Bharati, and private players like Tata Communications have partnered with DT Tech, South Africa, to build new cloud-based virtual mobile networks for the next generation mobile and Internet of Things connectivity. Perhaps we should think of using the same platforms for promoting people-to-people relations through holding e-exhibitions of films, showcasing travel and dance, and organizing youth festivals where the young can connect. Now that Indian missions are expanding their presence in Africa, these could promote Indian culture through e-platforms, just as the American centers are doing during the COVID period in India, holding American film festivals, music shows, and talks using web platforms. If this webinar is connecting us with such eminent speakers from so many parts of the African continent, why cannot these same platforms be used for cultural and various people-based connectivity? We continue to view Africa and African people through a third hub, the lens of Western media and filmmakers. We could connect directly through the digital space, which offers a multitude of options and vast social space. If 2020 has taught us anything, it is that physical presence is certainly very necessary, but there are other alternatives which are also viable. What is needed, however, is innovative thinking and a broadening of vision to engulf acceptance and appreciation of differences. I'm optimistic that we are getting there, but maybe the respective governments can give us a gentle prod. I will end with some well-known lines from our very own Bengali Nobel Prize winning poet, Rabindranath Tagore. All of you know it actually. The first few lines, not the whole poem, and then the last line, because these seem to sum up, both parts of our talk. Where the mind is without fear and the head is held high, where knowledge is free, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow domestic walls, into ever-widening thought and action, into that heaven of freedom, my Father, let my country awake. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. That was very nice, and I'm glad that you elaborated on some of the points that I had made and added more. This gave us a good basis to work on. I will now request Alassane Cissouma to please make his intervention.
So good morning, everybody. As you know, my name is Alassane Cissouma, a journalist from Mali. So I say welcome to everybody to this session. I'm very glad to be participating to this summit between my continent and one of the powerful countries of the world, that is India. So as you know, nowadays, in order to achieve a sustainable development, it is important to intensify a cooperation between people. So in 2018, by announcing the opening of 18 news embassy in Africa, by 2021, India clearly showed its willingness to strengthen its position on the continent. But beyond the diplomacy, India can further increase its presence by touching other areas such as culture, tourism, and sport that play a very important role in strengthening relations between countries. In these three areas mentioned, India has something to offer and receive from Africa. For example, about Mali, that is my country. Mali is an old civilization country of northwestern Africa. It has a rich culture and heritage. The nomadic Tuareg, Fulani, Bozo, Fisher, Bambara, Dogon farmers, each of Mali and those ethnic groups have their own unique languages and history. These tribes have a vibrant lifestyle very similar to the tribes in India. Malian music and literature have been heavily influenced by the traditional oral storytelling. Malian music is much celebrated throughout the world. Traditional storytellers called griots here are called to perform at weddings and other events. Besides French, which is the official working language, French is the official, besides French, which is the official working language, 13 national languages are officially spoken in Mali too. The most spoken out of them is Bambara, representing 52%. In addition, there are Boumou, Bozo, Dogon, Pel, Sonike, Senofo, Tamashek, and Malenge, and so on. India and Mali have traditionally maintained friendly relations. Government of India has reiterated its willingness to further strengthen its development cooperation with a partnership with Mali. India has consistently opposed colonialism and liberally extended development assistance under various schemes to Mali over the years. Mali too has been supportive of India's line on various international issues. The government of Mali acknowledged India's contribution and look forward to further strengthening its relationship with India. On April 2020, External Affairs Minister of India, Dr. Sheikh Nasser, and Foreign Minister of Mali, Cheble Darame, had a telephonic conversation to discuss various aspects of bilateral relationships, including India's support to Mali during this COVID-19 pandemic. Consistently, India gave a huge consignment of life-saving medicine to Mali. 60 slots are allotted to Mali under the Indian Technical Economic Cooperation Program. So, under scholarship schemes, also are offered to Mali annually. Also, Mali has been offered the E-Vadiat Barret and E-Arod Barret network product to provide free education courses in various academic disciplines and free continuing medical education to doctors, nurses, paramedical staff, including free medical consultancies. With tele-education portal, iLearn provides access to over 500 courses in various disciplines, including engineering, technology, education, mathematics, and science, education, humanity, and arts, and teacher training. The portal will also offer 15,000 scholarships to Africans to to pursue undergraduate and postgraduate courses for premier public and private University of India. So I would like to mention also that there are several places in Mali that have a huge touristic potential. For example, Great Mosque of Djenne in Mopti. It is the largest adult building in the world. It has a unique design. First mosque here since the 13th century, currently built in 1907. So there is also Sankre Madrasa in Tombouctou, an ancient learning center, one of the three great mosques in Tombouctou. There are also several UNESCO World Heritage sites in Mali, like such as Bandiagra Cliffs and Land of Dogon in Moti region. There is also Timbuktu Tawan. It is a very known Tawan. In the field of culture, Mali is musical powerhouse with diverse musical traditions which are being carried toward by Malian youth. Djembe, kora, ngoni are major musical instruments in Mali. There are many well-known musicians such as Oumou Sangaré, Salifou Keita, Amadou and Mariam, and Sidiki Diabaté and Toumani Diabaté also. There are also many endophiles in Mali who regularly conduct programs on Indian culture, Bollywood, and so on. So Prime Minister, Prime Minister of India, Sri Narendra, and his program, Man Ki Baat, on last September, praised Mr. Seydou Dembélé of Mali for his passion to Indian culture. This was an unprecedented event in the history of India-Mali relationships. It is the first such occasion when an individual from either country was publicly appreciated by the political leadership at the highest level. Also, many Malians and Mauritanians are fond of Indian TV, serial, and Bollywood movies, which they watch online. Moreover, there are about 15 radio presenters who present radio programs dedicated to indie films, music. There are also more Malians who are interested in Indian dances, mainly dances performed in indie films. Such local artists will be available for Indian cultural events to be organized in Mali. These endophiles of Mali periodically organize programs dedicated to indie films, music, which are also accompanied by Indian dances. There are also several historical and cultural linkages of Mali with India. For example, eating with hands, wearing cotton cloths, unity in diversity, cultural diversity also. Mali is a secular state, despite Muslim is being in overwhelming majority. Most Malians follow Malikite Sunni, which has been influenced by Sufism and written many Islamic traditions. Creative expression in music and art also encouraged in Mali. As far as the sport is concerned, with millions of fans around the world, football can be a major exporter for India. For example, the Under-17 World Cup organized by India in 2017 was a great showcase for the country that many people have never considered as a country where football is played. For many African countries, India can learn how to revolutionize its football and make it much more attractive. And Mali can be a good example in this area. A great country of football nowadays, Mali is a reference and a model of success in the development, policy, and promotion of football. Having one of the most successful technical departments on the continent, Mali reveals talented footballers at each international competition. So, the prowess of Seydou Keita at the FC Barcelona, Mahamadou Diarra at Real Madrid, and Frédéric Oumar Kanoudé at FC Sevilla, the different trophies of African Cup of Nations won by Mali national teams demonstrated that Mali is a great nation of football that has a good basic training to train and rivals international renowned footballers. With grassroots training policies led by the National Technical Direction of Malian Football Association is a textbook case that emerging countries in the field of football can use to promote this sport in their land. So, beyond diplomacy, India can also forge cooperation links with Mali and in the sport field, in particular its national football technical direction to develop this sport in India, knowing that the National Technical Director of Malian football is among the world experts recognized by the FIFA. So Mali can share its expertise with India to promote its football. It is the same case concerning basketball. Mali is a great basketball country that can help very well India. So, like an exchange of currency, India can also, in return, develop in Mali a sport in which it excels globally. I mean, the cricket. As you know, if cricket as the popular sport in India, India can reach thousands of Malians throughout this sport that Malians are discovering. Generally practiced by students at school, Malian cricket suffers from a lack of support, on particularly at all levels, whether material or training. By providing its support and expertise to Mali in this sport, India has a strong lack of increasing its presence throughout the country because Malian Cricket Association has a target students who are starting to make an interest at this sport. So globally, this is what I could say about this topic. So I say thank you.
Thank you very much, Alassane. From your intervention, I can say one thing, that one of the few things we have to work on if we need people-to-people contact is languages. Because it's important that more and more language, that's the reason India has had limited contact with the youth of Western Africa because of the language differences, and more contact with Eastern Africa because of the affinity of the English language. But that is one part of it. And like you rightly pointed out, the two main things that we are looking at is films, music, and sports. Like Dr. Bhattacharya before you also said, these are important issues on which we can bring people to people together, especially music. I've been listening to Tumani Diabate and Balake Sissoko for a long time. And in fact, one of your great bands, Tuareg band, Tinariwen, was something which I used to listen long back. So this is brilliant music you have in Mali. Even some of the brilliant authors were there. Now you have stopped writing as much as you used to write in the past. But I know from West Africa, there's a plethora of literary activities which come out. So I'm delighted that you took out the best points about the fact that films, music, and sports are the three things which can unite us, apart from making sure that language is there. Now I will call on Mr. Waihiga Mwaura. Waihiga, it's up to you. Your intervention, please.
Thank you so much. The challenge of being the last speaker is that all your good points have been taken by the other speakers. So let me just throw up a PowerPoint, say a few things, and open this up for discussion, because I think that's what we want to get to. Just give me a second to allow me to do that. Let me know if you can see what I have on the screen. Okay, are you able to see that?
Yes, we can see you.
Perfect. And you can see the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Okay, let me get into it. First, let me begin by thanking the organizers of this conference, the Indian Council of World Affairs, the chair, my fellow panelists, and everyone who's tuned in for this. It's a great honor to be here. I come from Nairobi, Kenya. In case you've never been, we are in East Africa, dare I say the dominant nation there, the home of the world's fastest runners, including the fastest marathoner, Eliud Kipchoge, and also partly the home of Barack Obama, former US president. It did get him in trouble, but just to give you some context of where I'm from. My name is Waihiga Mwaura. I'm the special projects editor at Citizen TV, the leading media house in Kenya. I have 11 years media experience. and I've been able to do quite a bit within that time. What I want to talk about is a little bit about the role of media and how important it is in getting the message out to our two countries, continents, about the kind of synergies and symbiotic relationship that we want to foster between India and Africa. Now, the picture that you're seeing on your screen is not in India or in Africa. It's actually at the BBC headquarters in London. They call it the world's biggest newsroom. And this is where I got to spend some time in 2018 under a program that I won an award for. And I learned some interesting things when I was there that I wanted to share with each of you. One of the things that I discovered when I was there was that 2 years prior to that, the BBC had launched one of its biggest expansions since the 1940s, okay? And they onboarded 11 new languages. Now, I don't know if you can see a pattern in those languages. We're talking about Oromo from Ethiopia, Amharic, Ethiopia, Gujarati, India, Igbo from Nigeria, Korean, okay, further to, in Asia, Marathi, I think, is still in India. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Pidgin from Nigeria, Punjabi, Telugu from India, Tigrinya, and Yoruba from Nigeria. The BBC did their math, and in terms of using their soft power, they set their sights squarely on India and the African continent. And the time that I was there, it opened my eyes to what are they seeing in these two parts of the world that we are not seeing. And remember, there was a time when the British Empire, I think only 20 countries had not been colonized by them then. So when they are looking to a particular direction, we in the rest of the world need to pay attention to that. And so I discovered also that in addition to those language services, that they were building two of the world's biggest bureaus, one in Kenya and another, I believe, in New Delhi. So these are the two largest hubs of the BBC outside of Britain. And so I did at that point ask myself, what are they seeing that we are not seeing? But more importantly, how can we take the benefits of what they are seeing and make sure that they first serve us before serving others? And some of the things I discovered, which the chair of this panel actually alluded to at the beginning of this discussion, was a quickly growing population, talking about combining India, Africa, you're talking about over 2 billion people, a youth bulge that's growing faster than in any other part of the world. But there's also a sense in which the media and the culture in both those regions have not fully told their stories, because how does a foreign player come into your market unless there are gaps? And I'll give you an example. When the BBC came to Nairobi, a section of Kenyans online started saying there are certain stories that our media here isn't telling, that the BBC is coming in to fill as a gap. Now, as a media practitioner in Kenya, I completely disagree with that, but it is an opinion that's out there and one that's held widely. And also, could it also be that in parts of India and in parts of the African continent, there's no dominant media? Again, let me not speak for India, but I do know that in certain African countries, apart from the state media, which sometimes can be very one-dimensional, there is still greater room for storytelling, for capturing the experiences of people, whether positive or negative. And it's possible that that's what the BBC was seeing when they decided to go into some of these languages as well. And that made me really think about what more needs to be done. How do we move forward on this? Let's first analyze the state of our media, both in India and in Kenya. I pulled up a Reuters Institute report. The data might be a bit old, but there are some trends here. They spoke about Indian media having 250 news channels and a greater number of private radio stations. The Times of India still ranked in the top 10 circulated newspapers globally. And Indian media was described as diverse, as muscular, and largely free press, noisily holding power to account. If any of you work or consult for those organizations, those are not my words. Those are the words of this particular report. So let me attribute it to the right people. But in terms of challenges, just like any other media space, one, corruption was cited as a major challenge in the India media sector. Second, paid news touted as news of the day, but it's actually been sponsored. And that was a concern for some, because if it's sponsored, if it's paid for, can the media outlets declare that? And thirdly, a narrow editorial agenda, which largely speaks to India's largely urban and booming middle class and does not capture the voice of the other sectors of that society. Could that be where other media houses are capitalizing on? But what's happening on the African continent? Now, I must warn you, Africa, we're talking about over 54 countries, depending on, there's been a bit of a squabble in North Africa over 1 or 2 countries. So let me just say over 54 countries. So it's a bit hard to talk about Francophone Africa versus Anglophone, but in general, across the African continent, radio still remains the dominant player according to a 2017 survey. But sadly, few of those radio stations broadcast outside Africa. Television, still a major source of information in Africa as well, with a digital migration process ongoing. In Kenya, it happened about 3-4 years ago, but it's also still happening in other parts of the continent. Print on the continent, newspapers, etc., on the decline like anywhere else, but still a powerful player if you want to speak to Africans because of the slower internet penetration. But I must also say, over the last 5 years, we've seen massive strides in internet penetration across the continent. I can speak in Kenya where I say, when I leave Nairobi and go up country, people are able to access the internet there quite easily. It's still expensive, but we are seeing a lot of them consuming their information more now on phone than on TV. And that's a challenge for journalists like me. We are constantly having to adapt. But the challenges of media in Africa, many operate under severe government restrictions, according to our 2019 World Press Freedom Index. The other challenge is that the budgets are shrinking. This, of course, is a global phenomenon. We're seeing it in New York, we're seeing it in London. But what it does in Africa is that many mature journalists then leave and go and look for other things to do because they're not making enough money where they are. Now, why have I gone this route of really speaking about media? Because media is so powerful in painting a picture of what is important and what is not important for our society. So if India and Africa want better collaboration, both their medias must play a role in spearheading this. You can't rely on other interventions. You must look at media as a key player in all this. And I'll give you an example. If I had $1,000 in my pocket and I could offer it to the winner of what I'm about to show you, I'm sure many people would jump at this opportunity. But I have 2 characters I want to show you. And I can imagine one of them, you'll immediately know who that is off the top of your head. But for the second one, it might take some time. Let me put up the first picture. I think this person is known across the world. I don't know, maybe you can even just raise your hand if you don't know them. But I'd be very surprised if anyone doesn't for her positive or less than positive attributes. But the fact is, because of how media has placed her and her family, she has now become a global phenomenon. Okay. But if I move on to the next person, and if we were meeting physically, I'd try and get a few hands up and ask, how many know this person? How many know what they've done? And in many meetings that I have spoken at, very few people are able to name them. And they give me all sorts of names out there. Is it I don't know, Amazon? I don't know why they think he looks like the Amazon founder or so forth. But this is Tim Berners-Lee, who is deemed the father of the internet. The reason that we are able to connect today virtually is because of the work done by this man. But because he does not feature, in your TV or newspaper or radio or internet every day, we've forgotten about him. He's alive and well, and the people who are enjoying the fruits of his work are the likes of this lady. And I think for me that's very powerful, because it then gives you an idea of why media must play a role front and center in championing a partnership between India and Africa moving forward. And so maybe just to wrap up by saying it is clear, and previous speakers have spoken to this, that India and Africa has many similarities: history, trade, culture, demographics, and thus we must come together and figure out how we can partner on media. And by media, I also want to capture film, because storytelling is very important for our cultures. But I would also say that for the traditional part of media, we need journalists to visit, to learn, and understand each other's cultures so that we can better report about what's happening in your part of the world, as journalists in India also can better report on what's happening on the African continent. Now, earlier this year, I had the privilege of visiting India. Sadly, I only went to one part of to the south, a place called Hyderabad. And that's a picture of me posing at the Chow Mahala Palace. I'm told it's over 200 years old, believe it or not. And I'm sure many of you have had a chance to visit this beautiful place. One of my observations there was The people were very friendly, and I loved the time that we had there. We had gone for a wedding. One of the things that stood out for me was that whenever I was in the mall, people kept asking me if we could take photographs. Now, when that happened the first time, I thought, oh, okay, that's cool. I work in media in Kenya, so once in a while, people might stop me and ask me, can we take a photo? But it happened more and more and more. And whenever I visit a part of the world where people ask me to take photographs, it tells me that their media, their film, their culture probably does not portray enough African faces and voices for it to become commonplace. And so there is a gap for more black or sort of black and joint characters and stories about Africa. And I think previous speakers have alluded to this, because for the 2 weeks that I was there, almost every day I was asked to take a photo. And the last time that happened to me was in Antalya in Turkey. And I have been in London for some time. I've been in the States. That never happens. And so for me, it's just a sign that in terms of that collaboration, we definitely need to get more joint content, both in India and on the African continent. I think the difference for Kenya is that we have had Indians living in Kenya for over 100 years. In fact, our newest tribe, so to speak, in Kenya are the Kenyan Indians. So the situation here might be a bit different, but just something to think about. And finally, even as we move forward and look at how we can collaborate better, we must also look at what roles we can play in helping our societies and communities to merge in the global village that we live in. One of the articles that I pulled up, I'm a journalist, and these are things that I always want to research, was this article. It's actually on The Wire, which I believe is an Indian publication, talking about racial prejudice jeopardizing ties with African nations. We must figure out, as the International Indian Council of World Affairs, how these incidents can come down. I'm sure they are few and far between, but the challenge with us in media is that we then amplify them around the world. What more can we do to ensure that our societies better understand each other, better tolerate each other? Because that is the only way we truly will have that sort of the synergy that we are looking for. And for me, media plays a very important role, but I want to finish also by mentioning that in terms of film and culture, and I had a slide on that, which I sadly can't find right now. As a journalist who does the news, I realize that our audience increasingly responds more to film, culture, music than they do to news. So there must be a partnership. Your news must be able to tell your audience what's happening in Africa, that is if you're in India, and vice versa. But your culture, your music, your film should also reflect that. Our ratings at the station I work for are much higher during the entertainment segments than they are during the news. And I was very happy to hear from a previous speaker that there are collaborative programs between Nollywood and Bollywood. I hope that as they meet, they would also consider Kenya and East Africa. We do have some interesting work happening here. Just recently, a few Kenyan productions got onto Netflix. I hope this will open room for greater collaboration, because I believe that if India and Africa can decide to work better, closer together, we can definitely achieve a lot more, especially because of our joint and shared history, as one of the previous speakers alluded to. Thank you so much. I think now would be a good time to hand back to the chair, because I'm sure there are many questions for the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Waihiga. That was brilliant. In fact, I'm glad you went last, because in a sense you wrapped up everything that we discussed before. That while we need to focus on a lot of the issues, it can all be brought together by the media, because that's what joins all the dots together. The media is critical in taking forward all the efforts that we have. Whatever we want to do together, the media is critical. And I loved your analogy of Kim Kardashian and Tim Berners-Lee. That's brilliant. That was really nice. But one of the few things which you dropped as in thing which I think we should discuss is this whole idea of racial prejudice which is taking off. It's actually across the world. It's not just India or anywhere else. But I somehow have the feeling that whatever incidents may be there, the media actually blows it up much more than what it is, because it's a very, to be put in quotes, a sexy issue. It's something which media likes to blow it up. And so we have to be doubly careful in ensuring that whatever incidents happen are played down to the extent possible. And also the visit of journalists. I like that, because we are doing that a lot. But just government-sponsored visit of journalists will not work. It has to be a smooth flow which goes across through music, dance, films, cultural journalism, all kinds of journalism needs to go together because people need to know, and youth delegations traveling with each other. But thank you very much. Now I think I'll ask Neha if she has some questions from the people who are participating so that our panelists can answer. Neha, up to you.
Yes, sir. Sir, I see there are two questions in the chat box. One is from Mr. Akhilesh Upadhyay. The question is how to overcome Chinese influence in Africa. And the second one is from Dr. Nivedita Ray. How much of Indian content takes space in Kenyan media? So these are the two questions.
On the Kenyan media, I think Waihiga, you can answer that, and then we'll open it up the other one to the rest.
Okay, let me tackle the Kenyan media one. I think for me, credit to Bollywood for the work that they've done in spreading Indian culture beyond India's borders. I mean, from a child growing up, a week would not pass without an Indian film, an Indian soap, and I think that has increased as our media space was liberalized, more TV stations and online platforms as well. The other interesting trend that's been happening in Kenya is that people sometimes buy Indian content and then get voice actors to translate, so to speak, in different languages, various mother tongues. So, for example, the station I work for has a partner station that is in a vernacular language, and I kid you not, you will see Indian soaps where the language is in my vernacular, my mother tongue, so to speak. It's hilarious when I first saw it, but I'm told it's very popular. The ratings speak for themselves. So I would say that of the major TV stations in the country, each of them weekly should have at least one Indian program or one Bollywood program. And in terms of radio, we do have some radio stations that their target audience are the Kenyan Indians here as well. So they'll talk a lot about the culture, the arts, and everything else as well. So it also does help, for example, in Kenya that we have had Indians who've been living here for the last 100 years or so, and are very much part and parcel of Kenyan culture. In terms of collaborations and things like that, I haven't quite seen them, and maybe that's something I'll think about and be more on the lookout for, beyond today's conference. Thank you.
No. Thank you, Waihiga. In fact, one of the few things we have been discussing is to create a repository of content generation between India, Africa, actually between developing countries. It's not just India and Africa, because developing countries look for content from repositories in Western and developed countries. So, you go and ask for photographs and content and other things from depositories in the West, whereas we ourselves don't have our own and we do not exchange with each other. And today, that is something which we need to create. One of the few things you said was to create media linkages. And one of the few things you need to create media linkages is content linkages. Because there is not much content available on the things that are happening in the India-Africa corridor. And also just specifically Africa, which is pertinent to India, and specifically India, which is pertinent to Africa. Something we can work on. On the other question, how to overcome Chinese influence in Africa, would Dr. Bhattacharya or Alassane try to say something on that? And then I'll come back to Waihiga after that. Dr.
Thank you. Yes, yes, certainly. I'd like to say something on that because we have been working for quite some time on India, China, and Africa. China, of course, Indians were there in Africa much before the Chinese came, and therefore, in fact, I think we have a deeper footprint in Africa. And here, in fact, basically culture is very important. If you really look at it, I mean, there are, as you said, in Ramesses' nose, there were these, pepper buds. Well, it goes back a long way, the India-Africa trade. And in fact, we should cash in on that. People-to-people contact is very important. They have a lot of money. They can, basically invest a lot. They can build buildings. They can do all kinds of things. But what they can't do is basically, have the kind of goodwill that we have for Africa and, well, many Africans have for us. And in fact, I think we should build on it rather than spoil it by, in fact, not kind of promoting things like we've been talking about right now. People to be, if you look at Sudanese, all right, that's the way the women dress. Now that's very close to, well, some of the North Indian villages, you know, I mean, so which shows that there is a kind of proximity, the kind of colors they wear, the clothes they wear, all right, and such is something that Indians like. Now these are things we think only in terms of energy and stuff like that. We could think of textile exchanges, we can think of, as I said, books, films, etc. We can get to know each other better, and that's the best way to counter well, Chinese influence in Africa, because we have an inbuilt advantage of long centuries of connections and history.
Wonderful. Thank you. Alassane, do you want to say something? Google. It's okay if you have nothing to say. Waihiga, do you want to go? Because I just wanted to say before any of you say anything that, this is a question which is a very strange question, because there's no overcoming any Chinese influence. It's basically increasing your own. Every country in the world will try to increase its own influence. So instead of trying to overcome anybody's influence, you just try and increase your own, which is the way it is. And that happens organically if you both work together. And that's something which I've always believed. A negative way of looking at things is not the right way. It's a positive way. How do we build up each other's confidence in relationship? How do we take it forward? Other relations will happen on its own. The world is today a family, and you cannot just say that you cannot have a relation anywhere else. You just have to have my relationship. So we will do that. But Waihiga, do you want to say something? Because in the media, you must be facing this kind of questions all the time.
I was actually going to say, mean to be rude, but I think I would like to question the framing of that question. Gone are the days when Africa was this virgin land, ready for the taking and that sort of thing. Africans are awake. They are on social media, really trying to push for rights and push to get out there and just doing amazing things out there. So for me, I think I would rephrase the question and say, how can we all better collaborate with each other, is the way I would put it. But secondly, I mean, you can't run away from the fact that Chinese influence in Africa has grown, that Chinese influence in Africa is, quote unquote, dominant based on the very deliberate approach the Chinese government has had. But that doesn't mean that there are not other sort of opportunities on the African continent for those who want to come and collaborate with Africans. So I always believe that if you want to get into a space where there is, quote unquote, a dominant player, you could either decide to take them head on, or you could look for opportunities that that dominant player has not taken seriously. And so I believe there are many sectors that the Chinese who've come to the African continent have not looked at. And if you want to collaborate, sit down with the people who live in that country, understand what those sectors are, and I'm sure you will find opportunities. So I do agree with you, Chair, that that's not the approach we should be looking at in 2020.
Yeah, I completely agree with whatever you have said. We need to see which are the commonalities between us which we can carry forward, rather than look to see how can we be better than the others. This is not the approach to do. There is, Neha, I can see one more question
Yes, sir.
but I think that's not a question which applies to this panel. That's just a generic question. I think we will not take that question. How much time do we have left?
Sir, 2 minutes.
2 minutes. So I'm going to wrap it up. It was a wonderful session because we're not going to extend the time. Thank you very much, Alassane, Waihiga, and Dr. Bhattacharya. What I gleaned out of this whole discussion and what I realized is important is that if we need to get to know each other, while the media is the vehicle through which we have to do it, we have to focus on 3 issues which came up. One is knowledge system, which means education, knowledge, knowing each other, having more research, universities working with each other. Second is films, dance, music, the whole cultural thing which we need to carry. Media, of course, becomes a vehicle. And the third is sports linkages. And I would, at the end, take up what Dr. Bhattacharya said in the beginning, is that you cannot look at Africa as a monolith, but as different countries. And you have to do it similarly. But in the end, the basics remain the same. The language may be different in different places, culture may be different in different places. But these 3 things, which is knowledge systems, music, dance, culture, and sports. These are the 3 things, if we can work on it, the future generations, the youth, which are going to be the future of both India and Africa, are going to have a better relationship because of our concentration on these aspects. While we have a great political and economic relation between both countries, sadly, we have not put much attention on this aspect, leaving it to the private sector and an organic growth for it to happen. What we need is for a little bit of government intervention where government guides the way in which these interactions can become better. Government should act as a catalyst to make sure that these interactions happen, much more than being the driver of this. So with that, I would like to thank everybody in the panel who have been there. Thank you very much. It was really interesting talking about this. And Neha, back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair, Ambassador Dinesh Patnaik, sir, for moderating the session. And thank you to all the panelists, Professor Bhattacharya, Mr. Cissouma, and Mr. Mwaura. It was indeed a very insightful and interesting session. We will break here for about 15 minutes and will join for the concluding session, which is a panel discussion on India-Africa, the way forward, at 5 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Thank you.